Hey, what's up YouTube? Back here with YouTube Q&A number 8, and we're gonna just jump right into it today with our first question. Hey Remi, a few days ago I was doing a back squat, and in my first set in the 3 to 4 reps, I felt an excruciating back pain. I stopped immediately my exercise program and I went home. I could not bend or extend my back because it was too painful. Maybe it's lumbago, I don't know. For the next 3 days, some anti-inflammatory drugs, and I'm feeling way better. How do you recommend I should start my exercise program? And what is your approach regarding the lumbago? Okay. So from the sounds of things, something could have went wrong on the squat. Maybe your technique was off, maybe a programming error, too much weight. Hard to say with regards to that, and that could have triggered something or an existing problem that maybe you didn't know about. It sounds like the tissue's injured. I would be very careful with exercise going forward, and with what you're doing in the gym. If you're a little bit unsure about your squat technique, just hire a trainer, hire somebody that can kind of coach you and cue you with regards to that. In terms of starting things, yeah, I would say just hire a professional, fitness professional that can help you out with the gym and make sure you're doing the right things with regards to your back issues, but it also make sure you go get checked out from a medical professional, see what's perhaps going on with your back, and to rule out any significant issues, but also to get some clarification on maybe what's going on and how to move forward. That would be my suggestion going forward with regards to the pain that you felt and exercise program. Second question. Remi, do you suggest doing the exercises, bicep curls, shoulder press, in a standing or a seated position? I generally recommend a standing position just because for the majority of the clients that I train, a lot of them have flexion-based back issues and they have pain with sitting, so it's very hard for them to get into the position of sitting. So I find that standing is just a more spine-sparing position, a little bit more functional, and people at the same time, even if I have clients without back issues, some clients I just have that are in a seated position all day at work. So getting them moving around in a seated position tends to be a little bit more spine friendly on the back. The only time maybe I'll do something seated is if someone has a knee, ankle issue, or just has a difficult time in the standing position and they have to go into a seated position because of another issue such as a knee or ankle. Next question. What's up, man? Just browsing through lots of your videos, was just curious, did you suffer any pain with pendulum rows, and have you done any upside down hangs? Could you name a few lower back strengthening exercises that you personally do, and what about hip thrusts? So with pendulum rows, yes, this was a painful position because of the hinge position, going backwards. When you have someone when you're adding load to the body, with regards to the row, and you hinge backwards, you're pulling on your nerves. So it's like taking an elastic band and pulling on them so they can come closer into contact with, say, disc herniation. Then when you factor in the added load and compression on the spine, that can be a painful position and just a difficult position for people to even get into. And that's the way the nerves are dragging along the spine, and say for a disc issue, adding the load in, that could trigger some symptoms in people. So I did not perform any of those, and to this day I still do not perform pendulum rows or any sort of bent over barbell rows for that matter, just because of the added load and the added stress onto the low back from being in that position. I just find there's a lot more ways you can train the back and not increase the stress with those exercises, such as we can do a TRX row, chest supported row. Those types of rows tend to be a lot more spine friendly, and we can still load them up with a weighted vest or with a chest supported row. Your chest is supported, spine is neutral, you can add weight on top of that. So that would be my kind of suggestions there. Upside down hangs, yeah, so inversion table, I had good and bad experiences with it. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but yeah, it hangs sometimes, I found relief from it just from hanging upside down, but then there was times later towards the end of my recovery where I'd get pain walking off, or as soon as I got off the inversion table, I would get some significant pain, and I think that was more due to the micro movements of the low back. Could you name a few lower back strengthening exercises that you personally do, and what about hip thrusts? So myself, I mean, there's plenty of exercises that I do for core training, whether it's rollouts, stir the pot, pal press, different planking variations, different carry variations, suitcase carries, plenty of exercises. Just depends on the person and the context and what you're using them in. Hip thrusts depends on the person that you're working with. So the difference between a glute bridge and a hip thrust, the hip thrust, there's more added range of motion. So a person that already has existing flexion-based issues could have a difficult time with the hip thrust because there's more range that they're moving through in terms of the motion, so their hips got to go back more. As opposed to the glute bridge, we can kind of limit some of that hip motion. So someone with more motion, or someone that doesn't respond to the more motion well, now can be a great exercise for them. But for just general people and that are healthy and fit, don't have existing back issues, I love the hip thrust. Use it with a lot of my clients, but I use it more as a progression. So I hope that answers your question. Moving on, number 4. I guess not everyone's going to suffer having to cut out the same exercises. Thanks for the reply once again. I'll try those exercises out and see what feels good for me. Yeah, I just recently started adding in hip thrusts. What upper back exercises do you do, and do you perform any type of squat? Would you recommend hack squat? Just kind of disappointed because I can squat and deadlift to an extent, but one wrong movement or anything, and that's me with another setback. So I just want an exercise replacement at this stage. My biggest recommendation is invest in a good trainer. I mean, it's hard for me to really give you advice without seeing you and doing an assessment on you and seeing what's going on. I mean, I can give you some suggestions to play with, but your best bet is just invest the money in a good trainer. But to kind of just touch on a few things, I already talked about hip thrusts, upper back exercises, TRX rows, chin-ups, pull-ups tend to be pretty spine-friendly. Chest supported row, like I mentioned earlier. Those are going to be kind of your go-to movements for upper back training or just back training in general, and that tend to be spine-friendly. Squats, yes, so I do squat, back squat, front squat, no issues. Hack squat can be okay, but just same idea. You want to look out for that butt wig, make sure your back is not rounding, just depends on the person, the context you're using them all in. So that would be my suggestion though. Really the big suggestion, hire a good trainer. Okay, question 5. Hey man, do you know by any chance if more pain equals a bigger disc bulge and vice versa? Because my pain is not awful and I'll just feel stiff and a little bit of radiating symptoms. So no, so here's a couple things to consider. People can have very large disc bulges, herniations, and have no pain. Or some people can have small herniations or bulges and have significant pain. There's a number of factors to consider. One is genetics. So the number of pain receptors that one has. This is more of a physiological breakdown. The more pain receptors one has, the more likely, in theory, they're going to experience pain. So if you have 10,000 pain receptors versus 1,000, just depends on the person. Everyone's physiology is different. So that's more of a genetic argument there. Second is the location. So you could have a very big disc bulge, but if it's not impinging on a nerve root or it's not around a nerve root, then you may be okay. Whereas if someone has a smaller disc bulge, if the location is correct and everything, then it can impinge on a nerve root and you have a smaller disc bulge, but you could have more pain. And then third is just your ability to adhere to spine-sparing movements in your daily habits in your life. So if you sit a lot, do a lot of sit-ups, do a lot of the wrong movements, you're going to get more pain just based on the disc bulge that you may have and where it's maybe hitting. Whereas if you practice good movements, like for example myself, just good spine-sparing movements throughout the day, limit sitting, not performing exercises like sit-ups or anything like that involves flexion under load, then that could limit the symptoms that you may experience. So a number of factors at play with regards to that. Last question, hi Remi, heat or cold? So generally I'm a bigger fan of heat. I mean, depends on the context they're using heat and ice in. I would recommend reading the book Ice to get a better perspective and knowledge and insight on that. I tend to not be a big fan of ice, but there's a situation for heat and ice just depending on what you're using it for and what you're trying to do. I tend to favor heat though, but that's just my kind of take on it. Like I said, look at the book Iced if you're looking for more information. Okay, with that being said, that's it for this Q&A. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions for future Q&A, please leave them below. And until next time, guys, all the best and take care.